Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start today's video with a story about a neighbor who thinks a pair of plastic flamingos are single-handedly ruining the entire neighborhood. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My neighbor hates my pink flamingos. I bought my house a couple of years ago, and ever since moving in, I've been slowly working to make it look nice. It's been a labor of love, hours spent weeding, mulching, trimming, and planting. The front gardens in particular have been my pride and joy. I've tried to keep them neat, colorful, and welcoming. A few weeks ago, I was at a local greenhouse picking up some new plants when I saw them, two pink yard flamingos sitting on a clearance rack. They were kitschy, a little ridiculous, and absolutely perfect. I don't care if they aren't everyone's idea of class, they made me smile, and really isn't that what a garden is for? I brought them home, set them up right by the flower beds, and stood back to admire my work. It made the whole place feel a little more cheerful. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't help but grin. Then a couple days later, there was a knock at my door. It was my neighbor. She launched right in without even saying hello. "You need to take those flamingos down. They're extremely gauche and they're lowering the property value of the neighborhood." I had to bite back a laugh. Yard flamingos lowering property values? Seriously? I told her politely but firmly that I had no plans to remove them. They made me happy, and as far as I knew, there was no ordinance against them. We're not an HOA, so there's no neighborhood committee that can dictate what goes on in my garden. She didn't like that answer. Apparently, my flamingos became the scandal of the week. My neighbor posted pictures of my house, my street, and a close-up of the flamingos in our town's Facebook group, complaining about how tacky they were. A few people in the comments agreed with her and said I should take them down for the good of the neighborhood. Then another neighbor came over in person to tell me I should get rid of them to avoid more drama. Even my mom got involved. She said maybe I should take them down just to keep the peace. But here's the thing, I don't want to keep the peace if it means letting someone else dictate what I can and can't put in my yard. They're not offensive, they're not blocking anyone's view, and they're definitely not dropping the property value of an entire street. So I've decided they're staying. Every time I see them when I pull into my driveway, I smile. They remind me that this is my home, a place I worked hard for, and I get to decide what it looks like. If a couple of plastic flamingos can spark this much outrage, maybe the problem isn't with the flamingos, maybe it's with the people who are upset about them. If anything, this whole ordeal has made me want to add more flamingos, maybe a whole flock, maybe a flamingo wearing sunglasses. If my neighbor's going to complain no matter what, I might as well lean in and really make my garden a conversation starter. For now, though, the flamingos remain, standing tall and pink, greeting me every time I come home and quietly annoying the people who think they get to control my lawn. I'm fully on Team Flamingo here. You've poured time, effort, and love into making your yard beautiful, and two cheerful pink birds are what's going to send the neighborhood into a meltdown? Please. The idea that they're lowering property values is laughable, as if one pair of plastic flamingos is going to tank the housing market. And our second story. Surprise! You're in an HOA you never agreed to. Guess who's president now? When I bought my house a few years ago, not a single person mentioned an HOA. Not during closing, not in the paperwork, not even a whisper. 2 months after moving in, I got a letter in the mail. "Notice of legal action. You owe past dues to the HOA, and we will be taking you to court if payment is not received immediately." Excuse me? What HOA? I asked neighbors, I dug through documents, nothing. Nobody could tell me who the HOA even was. Finally, I learned it wasn't a real board anymore. It was just one mean old lady and her equally nosy friend trying to keep the carcass of the old HOA alive. And they were running it like their own personal fiefdom. This woman, let's call her Karen, had been collecting dues and making demands for years. She was a one-woman HOA. She'd show up at doors, wagging her finger about violations she invented on the spot. If she didn't like your shutters, violation. Garden too colorful, violation. Dog barked twice in one afternoon, big violation. And the money? Yeah, she was skimming. Later, I learned the whole scam. She hired her brother to make a neighborhood sign, paid him $10,000 for something that looked like it was slapped together at Hobby Lobby. She claimed our neighborhood stipend checks from the county for road maintenance somehow never arrived for 3 years. She fined people without any paperwork, just a word of mouth, "You owe this much." I was already furious, but I figured I'd wait for the annual meeting to blow this wide open. When the day came, I showed up ready for a fight. I wasn't alone. Turned out a whole lot of people had been quietly simmering over Karen's reign of terror. Karen shuffled in with her friend and a stack of official papers, glaring at everyone like we were peasants. She opened the meeting with her usual lecture about standards and protecting property values. Finally, one neighbor raised his hand. "Neighbor, where's the road money, Karen? We haven't seen a plow in 3 years. Her face went pale, but she dodged. "Karen, the funds? There were banking issues." Then another neighbor number 2. "Why did your brother get $10,000 for a plywood sign? No one voted for it." Karen's friend tried to back her up, but the room was turning. People were angry, loud, and ready to vote. That's when someone suggested dissolving the HOA entirely. It almost passed, but here's the catch. If we dissolved it, all the money left in the account, around $35,000, would go to the state. Nobody wanted to hand the state a penny. So I stood up. Me. "All right, here's what we do. Keep the HOA but kick Karen out. Elect a new board. I'll do it. But here's how it's going to work. Dues slashed to the bare minimum. No micromanaging. No made-up fines. We'll use the money for 2 things only. Street lights and snow plowing. Everything else, do whatever the hell you want with your property." The room erupted. People cheered, nodded. I got voted in as president with 2 other guys backing me up. Karen tried to argue, but nobody listened. Her reign was done. It's been 3 years, and I haven't had a single complaint. Neighbors actually respect the neighborhood more now that they know someone isn't going to fine them for their mailbox color. We fixed some of the roads, kept the lights on, and when it snows, the plows actually show up. Sometimes when people get behind on dues, I just send a polite letter. That's it. No threats, no door knocking, no made-up violations. And Karen, she still walks around muttering about how I ruined the order of the neighborhood. Everyone just tells her the same thing. "You're the reason we need new leadership in the first place." She doesn't even show her face at meetings anymore, which is fine by me, because nothing makes me happier than knowing the woman who tried to scam us all out of money now has 0 power, 0 say, and has to walk by the $10,000 piece of crap sign her brother made every single day. Karen basically built herself a fake empire out of thin air, wagging her finger and inventing violations like she had the law behind her. The fact she was skimming money, funneling it to her brother for that $10,000 plywood sign, and pocketing road funds was straight-up theft disguised as authority. And our next story. When entitlement goes shopping, the freezer confrontation. This was years before Karen came to be a thing. It was summer, and I was dressed in my usual t-shirt, shorts, and sandals I wear when I'm not at work. I happened to stop by a grocery store I was passing by on the way home to see what might look good for dinner. After a few minutes of walking around, I ended up at the freezer section, which were the tall, upright freezers with glass doors. The store had stocked some items on top of these freezers, which were out of reach for most people. Now, I'm very tall, and I'm used to some people coming up to me asking me to help them get something, which I'm fine with because they ask politely. But in this case, it was something different. I was standing there at one end of the freezer section, looking through the glass door at what they had to choose from, when I hear this, "Come here and get this down." I really didn't pay much attention to it as I was busy looking for something to eat. After a few seconds, though, I hear, "I said come here now and get this down for me." I looked over down the aisle at the other end of the freezer section, and some old woman was glaring at me. I thought maybe someone was behind me, and I looked around, but it was only me and her on that aisle. Seeing as I'm not a servant, slave, or a dog, I turned back to the freezer and continued to look at products. Just then, it screamed at me in such a severe banshee tone. I thought the glass freezer doors would shatter. "I said come over here and get this down for me now." I turned and walked away, heading to the other side of the store. As I did, I heard her running after me, screaming in that banshee tone, "Come back here! I said get that down for me!" No matter how many turns I made or how many aisles I went down, she was behind me, chasing me. Luckily, I was much faster than she was. After about 2 minutes of this, I just headed for the front of the store and left out the front door, all the while hearing her banshee screeches, "Get back here and get that down for me!" Lucky for her, I'd reached the front doors before she reached me because I'd already made peace with myself about jail, because if she reached me and grabbed me, I was going to put my fist through her face. What if you were deaf? People never think that perhaps they're being ignored because the person can't hear them. Then she goes ballistic because she doesn't get the response she wants and assaults someone with a disability? Crazy bee. And our last story. Crazy Aunt Karen wanted to evict me from the house. 3 years ago, my family was grieving the loss of my grandmother. She passed away at 73, leaving behind 2 sisters, a big extended family, and quite a bit of real estate. When the inheritance paperwork started rolling in, something immediately smelled off. My aunt, let's call her Lydia, was extremely hesitant to give us a copy of the death certificate, which we needed to start the inheritance process. At first, I thought it was just grief making everyone slow to act, but the delays kept stacking up, and Lydia kept dodging my calls. Things were getting complicated, so I decided to take over the paperwork to help my mother. That's when I made a discovery that left me stunned. I found out that the apartment my grandmother had lived in, the one we all assumed would be split equally, no longer legally belonged to her. It had been transferred into Lydia's children's names. When I dug deeper, I discovered that most of my grandmother's other assets had also been signed over to Lydia before her death. I went straight to my mom with this information. She was heartbroken, but told me she wasn't surprised. She said that by the time those papers were supposedly signed, my grandmother was already in bad shape. Her dementia had progressed so far that she couldn't remember basic details about her life. In other words, there was no way she had the mental capacity to legally sign anything. Still, I wanted to believe this was just some misunderstanding, so I went to Lydia directly and asked how all this happened. She didn't even pretend to be diplomatic. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's none of your business. I plan to take everything I can, and whatever's left, I'll make sure you're forced out." I was floored. How could someone talk like that about their own sister, about family property, about my mother, the same person who had lent her money and helped her out of tight spots for years? When I told my mom, she broke down crying. She couldn't wrap her head around how her sister could betray her like this. But I knew what we had to do, take it to court. The problem was court costs money, and neither of us had much to spare. Mom was a working pensioner raising my 13-year-old brother, and I had just spent my savings on renovating her apartment. Thankfully, a lawyer friend of mine at work offered to help us. We gathered every document we could find and sent a formal letter to Lydia informing her that we were disputing the transfers in court. That's when things turned ugly. It started with threatening phone calls from Lydia's sons. I recorded every single one of them. Then they started stalking me, sitting outside my apartment, following me to work. My boss, concerned for my safety, assigned a company driver to pick me up and drop me off. One morning, as I stepped out of my building, my oldest cousin was waiting for me. He punched me square in the face, threatened me again, and ran. My driver witnessed the entire thing, helped me up, and told me his dash cam had recorded it all. I went straight to the police with the footage and the phone recordings. They opened a case. When police contacted Lydia about her son, she called me screaming, hurling insults, and threatening me. I calmly reminded her that her son was already facing charges for assault. She hung up. A week later, around midnight, there was loud banging on my apartment door. Before I could even reach it, the door flew open and 2 huge men walked in. They handed me paperwork and said, "We live here now. You should be leaving before something bad happens." I called the police. They came, looked over the documents, and told me the men were legally allowed to be there. Turns out Lydia had transferred part of her ownership rights to these so-called tenants, a shady tactic people use to pressure co-owners out of shared property. For 3 months, I lived in hell. They changed the locks repeatedly, blared music all night, trashed the common areas, and made my home unlivable. I barely slept, but eventually they gave up and left, and I stayed. When intimidation failed, my cousins got desperate. One night, one of them sprayed pepper spray all over my door in an attempt to force me out. But my apartment was sealed tight because I was doing construction work, so I barely smelled it. The very next morning was our court date. I brought every piece of evidence I had, the dash cam footage, the recordings, the police reports. The judge listened patiently and then ruled in our favor. So we secured my mother's rightful share of the inheritance. The judge also removed Lydia from inheriting anything else due to her harassment and fraud. When I returned home from court, I reported the pepper spray incident to police. That's when I learned that my elderly neighbor had been hospitalized with lung complications from exposure and had passed away overnight. My cousin's now facing criminal charges that could put him away for years. Today, my mother officially holds full title to all the real estate that was in dispute. I received a settlement for the threats and assault, which covered the renovations I'd done and then some. Lydia's stuck in her tiny apartment, bankrupt, with one son awaiting trial and the other fired from his rescue job and barred from ever working for government agencies again. After 3 years of constant stress, court hearings, and intimidation, we finally won. And they destroyed their own lives trying to take what wasn't theirs. Lydia wanted to force you out of the family legacy, and instead she handed it to you on a silver platter. It's the kind of outcome that leaves you sitting back with a deep, satisfied breath, not just because you won, but because you never let them rewrite the story of what was yours to begin with. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.